The value of values. Corporate values can be both powerful and problematic. We caught up with Dr. David Cohen at the HRPAO conference to talk about values. His book is called Thinking Inside the Box. And I started by asking him if he was even allowed to say that.
It catches people by surprise.
I'm sure it does. And what do you mean by it in the context that you're using it?
In the context I'm using it is that the concept is that culture will always trump strategy. Culture is based on the corporate values. So therefore, having a clear understanding of the corporate values and therefore having people understand that as long as you behave within that range of behavior, you'll always be okay. Get outside that box, you will not be okay. And the other part, which is in the introduction of the book, is my grandfather had a box company, and also my father had a box company. And it was my first real look at organizations which were values-based organizations.
A personal metaphor for you then.
So it's personal.
Now, let me ask you about values and about the articulation or identification of corporate values. For someone who works in a company that hasn't done that work and put it on a piece of paper, what would you go looking for? How would you figure out what they are?
You figure them out by the leadership. They're a top-down activity. Plus the fact you figure them out by the history of the organization. For instance, Jack Welch was not good for GE. GE was good for Jack Welch. Why? Because he had exemplified the values of Thomas Edison. So the question then becomes, why does everybody believe that graduating from the leadership school of Jack Welch and GE makes you a good leader at other companies? It doesn't. It makes you a good leader at GE, unless your company is like GE in the values and the culture. Apropos, Nardelli has recently found out that trying to impose an engineering, militaristic, top-down culture in a retail organization which was entrepreneurial just doesn't work.
The now former CEO of Home Depot.
Former.
Yeah. You talk about...
The only problem there is they have the perfect storm brewing because they took one of his people and put him in it to replace him.
Right.
So, you know, they out with the bad and in with the bad kind of thing.
Right. You talk about above ground versus below ground values. What do you mean by that?
The above ground values are the ones that are on the back of that business card, the ones that the organization, if you ask the employee in a moment away from work or even at work, they're pretty cynical about because they talk about it, but they don't do any of those things. Those are the ones that are articulated, they use for recruiting, you use as part of your employee brand, but aren't actually lived. The underground are the real values, the things that your culture is based on, because your culture is defined by your values. What repeatedly has served people well to be successful in the organization are the values of the organization, and they're taught from generation of employee to generation. Those are the underground. When the underground and the above ground are one and the same, then you have a healthy organization.
Now, for some, and certainly for unhealthy organizations, there may be values that don't work in today's business environment, but they're really there. How do you evolve them, change them, transform them?
I don't think you do.
You don't?
No, I don't think you can evolve values over a very long period of time. But when, and Nardelli is a perfect example, even 5 years trying to come and impose a different set of, a different culture, values on an organization, it doesn't work. And even 5 years, even replacing the entire leadership cadre at Home Depot, because they were all from Honeywell and GE, he still couldn't make it work. So the reality is that you have to celebrate the values that got your company to be good in the first place and differentiate that from strategy. A lot of organizations, I think, scare their employees, if I could say that, by saying we're going to evolve the culture. The reality is they're not evolving the culture at all. They're not changing the culture. They're changing their business strategy. So they're going from a quality group to a customer service group. But the values, whatever were there to begin with.
Dr. David Cohen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Dr. David Cohen is principal with the Strategic Action Group.